So you're not a Florida native, correct?
That is correct. I was born in Fort Hood, Texas. My dad was drafted in the Army. They moved to Texas. 2 years later, they had me, and 2 years later, they kicked him out. So they said, hey, you're a father. You get to go home. So he had to do 2 years, and they didn't keep him. So they let him go back, and he moved right back to Fort Lauderdale. So that's where I grew up.
Growing up in Fort Lauderdale, what was that like?
Well, you ever heard about spring break in Fort Lauderdale? It's a great town.
I've heard of spring break in Daytona Beach.
All right. Well, it originated in Fort Lauderdale. So, no, it's a great place. We lived on the water. We had a home. My parents still live there, 53 years now. And I had ocean access to the ocean. So it was a beautiful place to grow up. We had, I always remember my neighborhood, 16 friends in my neighborhood. We played football, we fished, we had woods to play in, and we had access to the water through the woods. We had a lot of fun in Fort Lauderdale. I lived there till I was 19 years old.
There's definitely something to be said for Gen X.
I don't know if that's what I am. I don't know. It was a great time. I can tell you, growing up in the 80s in Fort Lauderdale was a great place to be. It was different.
What brought you to Port Orange?
So a job. I worked at a hotel in Fort Lauderdale, and I worked for a company contracted to the hotel, and we did valet parking. And so what happened was, throughout my tenure there, they had me moving to hotels, opening them up, getting them started, moving to another location, getting them corrected. And then ultimately, the opportunity came to open up the Daytona Beach Marriott, which was in 1988. And that brought me to Daytona.
So every time I park my car and there's valet parkers, I always get this sense that valet parkers have a lot of fun in life.
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of fun. It was a great career. I did it for like 11 years. And but there's a lot of nights, a lot of weekends when everyone's having a good time and you work at a resort. You're working because everyone's having a good time. You got to take care of them. So that's where my service industry started, in the hospitality business.
Tell me about a valet parking story that nobody has heard.
Okay, so when you park cars, things happen. You lose keys and you wreck cars. It's just what happens. If you move enough cars, you're going to lose the keys to the cars you've been moving. And if you move enough cars, you're going to hit something. So they call them claims. So back in the day, we didn't have digital cameras. We had Polaroids. So when we have an accident, we take a picture of with a Polaroid of the accident, and we fill out a report. And then when I'd get to work, I'd review the claims from the previous day. They were often, and have to call the owner of the car and go through the process of the claim, and that we'd take care of it. And I show up to work one day and I see the front end of a Nissan crashed in. And in the report, it says that upon impact, the owner's pet dog broke his neck against the dashboard.
Oh, no.
And the owner is upset and you need to call him ASAP. So when I made the phone call to the owner, it was another employee. It was a practical joke that they pulled on me.
Oh, no.
So did we have fun? Yes. Usually playing practical jokes on one another. But it was a great business. It was a great opportunity to employ people. Valet parking is a great job for people who need to go to school, want to work at night and surf in the day like I did. It led to a career. But that's, it was a great business. I really grew up in it.
And what do you do today?
So today I work for a clinical trial company. I'm their community ambassador. So we study diseases without cures. And my responsibility is to let the public know the service that we provide. So we ask people to come in and participate. They're compensated for their time. So it's the first time in my life I don't have to sell something. We actually pay people to come see us. But it's a great opportunity to meet people that are looking for something that there's no cure for Alzheimer's. Well, we have studies that are looking at drugs that might help slow the progression of it down. So we recruit people that are interested in that.
It seems that there's a lot of clinical trial industry in Florida, and it seems that Alzheimer's is the big is the big project for pharmaceutical companies going on? Are there any sort of breakthroughs on the horizon? Any successes that you're seeing?
Yeah, there are some medications that have been approved by the FDA that have shown to slow the progression of disease down. And the key with any disease is early detection. We see Alzheimer's patients that are 60 years old. So anytime after 50, you might have some cognitive decline. That's something you shouldn't just take for granted. You should look into it and see what the cause of it is. And they know now that there are proteins in the blood that develop into the brain that cause these issues. So we're looking at medications to slow that progression down and maybe reverse it. And there's been some approvals on some medications that are actually working. And so now we're studying, medications that might have a little more effectiveness. And by the time we get to study, we're usually studying the dosage amounts. So that's what we do. It's really a service to the community.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear there's maybe a breakthrough in an early detection blood test that you can take. You can do in your 30s now that can see if you've got the markers, and it's really fascinating to me.
So they're perfecting that, and we know what. Usually, you knew someone had Alzheimer's when you did an autopsy. Now they have PET scans that can detect the amyloid protein and the tau protein in the brain. We know those proteins cause Alzheimer's. So we're going after those proteins. And now if we can detect them early on in the blood, then you do a PET scan. And if it shows up, then you're going to have that disease.
It's an important industry for Florida because Florida probably has more retirees and seniors than anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, Alzheimer's typically affects people that are getting older. We do see people that are in their 60s that may have had a history of it in their family, and they're starting to see some cognitive change or decline, and they show a concern, or someone sees it in them, and then that's usually, people 65 and over. So Florida is, it's where people want to come to retire, and they're going to be older. So, I could see where, you have 55 and over communities popping up all throughout the state. So it's a good place to start studies.
I always have this theory that the Florida story is that you either retire to Florida, you come to visit Disneyland, or your story is I was doing this, and then I ended up in Florida. Yeah. That seems to be people's story. And I'm from the latter. I never ever planned to move to Florida, but I love living in Florida. I always say it's kind of my kind of crazy. That's what I say about Florida. I enjoy living there. What do you enjoy about Florida?
Well, I think the weather is one. I mean, in Florida the weather is different from where you're at, like any other state, but Florida's a lot different that we're long. So we have South Florida and then we have North Florida. You could be in North Florida, Daytona Beach area, and it's 53 degrees, cold, rainy, and windy. And in South Florida, just 3 miles south, it's 75 degrees and sunny. So it's a great escape from Daytona to Fort Lauderdale on a weekend that it's going to rain. Like this weekend coming up, it's going to be a high of 65 and it's going to rain. We could head down to Fort Lauderdale 3 hours away, straight down 95, and it'll be 75 degrees and beautiful. And we're swimming in the ocean. And you come up here in Daytona, water's 51 degrees. So there's a big difference in Florida in the winter. It's like in New York, it's probably the whole state's cold, right? In Florida, it's different. So you have the Panhandle, then you have the eastern seaboard, you have the West Coast. And I've had the opportunity to live in Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville, Orlando, and now Daytona. So I've experienced all that. And you asked about people moving to Florida. Well, I've been a realtor for 28 years. So along with the valet parking, I got my real estate license. And I've been selling real estate to people for 28 years. And the first thing I ask somebody when I meet them in Florida is, where did you come from? What made you choose Florida? I like to ask that question.
I've heard discussion before that there has been talk about splitting Florida into two states, North and South Florida, like North and South Dakota. What do you think of that?
I've never heard it.
No?
We did. We split. We put I-4 right between Daytona and Tampa, and you got the south side of I-4 and you got the north side of I-4. But no, I've never heard that.
Because there's kind of you could say that there are cultural differences between North Florida and South Florida. They're kind of developing differently along even cultural lines.
Exactly. You have, obviously South Florida had a big influx of refugees from Cuba. You have Puerto Rico. A lot of people want to leave Puerto Rico. They want to leave Haiti. They want to leave South America, and there's opportunities in South Florida. There's lots of jobs. You have Port Everglades and Fort Lauderdale, then you have the Port of Miami. So you have a lot of commerce coming in and out of those ports that create great opportunities for people to live. And I see what you're saying, where the culture is different, because you have a melting pot of South Florida. You have people who want to be there in the winter from New York and Ohio and all those northern towns 6 months out of the year. You have people from South America find opportunity, and their families started, and then they want to live with their family. So you have an influx of South Americans and the islanders that come in, and they don't quite get to Central Florida. Central Florida they do because there's jobs. So with Orlando and its expansion from Disney and all what happened in the late 70s and 80s with the expansion of Disney and now Universal, and just great opportunities for jobs, you have a lot of the people from South Florida and from those countries skip Miami and come right to Orlando. And then Daytona is completely different from Orlando and South Florida. We don't have a big influence of people from those areas because we didn't have the jobs. And I mean, we have jobs, but we don't have. Port Orange is 65,000 people.
So, what makes Port Orange tick?
I think the quality of life. You come off of 95 and you pull on the Dunlawton, and right away you notice how beautiful it is. When Port Orange was developing, and it's not that old of it's an older city. It's 100 years old. I guess it's 100 years old. I mean, Port Orange goes way back to the Seminole Indians. But when it started developing in the early 90s, it was prominently manufactured homes. Prior to that, it was a great place for people to retire. It was affordable. Dunlawton was a 2-lane road from A1A out to 95. I remember driving it in 1987 and thinking, wow, this is all these trees. And when it started developing and Daytona started expanding and Ormond, and things just started happening in Port Orange with new development, they decided, hey, we're going to do this not by chance, but by choice. We're going to make sure there's setbacks. We're going to make sure that the construction looks similar. We're just not going to let everything happen the way anyone wants it. We want to do it by choice, not by chance. And they did a really good job of creating, as things developed, the setbacks and the monument signs opposed to, real tall signs. They did a really good job. And I think people see that and they want to live there.
So, I mean, I've known you for a while. You've worked very hard in your life. You're a pretty successful person, and all of a sudden you've decided, I'm gonna get into politics. What happened?
Well, it wasn't all of a sudden I decided I was going to get into politics. I've been involved in politics since I've been in real estate, and I learned a long time ago from a friend named Ann Jordan, who's a realtor and been in the Daytona Beach area forever. She said, if you're in business, you're in politics. So as long as I've been in business, I have been in politics. And with real estate, we're in the politics of making sure that people who own property, that they have rights. And when someone owns property and they have rights, you have to legislate, and you have rules. You have, like we talked about setbacks and so forth. And we talk about long use comprehensive land use plans that, when Port Orange was developing, they decided how they wanted it to look. and they created these subdivisions and these rules, these plans. Like, hey, what would be allowed here in the future? We know it's zoned agricultural now, but what's its future use going to be? And they designated things for future use. They did this 25, 30 years ago. Now we're starting to see that future use be used, and everyone's like, whoa, time out. Why are they doing that? Because they have the right to. And I learned a lot about that in real estate business is, owners of property have rights. And, to get those rights changed, maybe from agricultural to commercial, so you can get a better value of what you want to sell. You have this property and you want to sell it for a higher value. Well, if it's zone agriculture and you can't do anything with it, it's not worth much. But if you change that zoning to commercial, and we need commercial zoning, there's a need for it. There's a balance that we have to have between residential and commercial and agricultural. And so that's why I got into it.
So what are the other factors at play in Port Orange? You've got a political career ahead of you. You're actually running for office now. What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, to maintain that quality of life that I fell in love with 13 years ago when I came to Port Orange. I lived in the greater Daytona Beach area, South Daytona and Daytona, and then had the pleasure and the opportunity to move to Port Orange, and now I own a home there. I've owned a home there for almost 10 years now. I want to help maintain that quality of life. I've had the opportunity to coach in its recreation system. I've had an opportunity to sell property in new developments, and there are developments that I probably wouldn't have approved, maybe, but I've learned that there's got to be something for everybody, and really want to be involved to help maintain the quality of life. We do have some opportunities for some small growth. Most of Port Orange is built out. So how do we maintain that? How do we redevelop things that are just so old that the only way we're going to get anyone interested in it if we allow the zoning to change and some redevelopment to happen? And that's happened in lots of cities in South Florida, where something that was built in the 50s is now being redeveloped, and it's a lot nicer. It's to code. It's elevated from flooding. So a lot of change happens in redevelopment. I want to be a part of that. There's a lot of that getting ready to happen in the US 1 corridor. So I want to help guide that.
So you're a family man. So tell me about your family.
Yeah. So I have 3 adult children. I have a daughter who's 30. I have a son who's 26, and I have a daughter who's 23. And all 3 of them went through Spruce Creek High School. I had a daughter that graduated through the IB program. I had a son who graduated, and my son and younger daughter went to UNF, and my son brought his talent back. My oldest daughter went to Florida State. She took her talent to California and now Texas. And my youngest daughter, she stayed she graduated University of North Florida, got married, and she works up in the Jacksonville area. So yeah, 3 children, and my wife, who just retired after serving Volusia County Schools for 31 years. And so she kept her talent in Volusia County, which we always hope people will do, and she did. And she's 31 years and now retired from Volusia County Schools.
So it's important to you, I know from knowing you, that it's important that families feel safe and have a good place to live, and that's kind of what Port Orange does for you, is it's a safe, community-driven. And I know that you're very motivated by communities and safe communities. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so, the city of Port Orange was recognized as one of the 2nd safest cities in the state of Florida. And that's an amazing accomplishment. We're a small little town, but a lot goes on. We have a lot of business. We have a lot of families, a lot of traffic. We have a lot of kids playing sports. We have 2 high schools in Port Orange. Multiple elementary schools. We have 2 middle schools. So we have a lot going on there could be problems. So we have to have a culture in our law enforcement that creates an opportunity where people want to work there. And, we want to make sure they have competitive salaries. We want to make sure that our police chief has the tools he needs to make it a place where they want to work, and that culture is there. And to me, that's really important, along with our fire services. So City of Port Orange has their own fire service, and they have their own police officers. And our city manager hires those individuals to run that. He needs to have the tools. So we maintain a great, safe city. And ironically enough, the #1 safest city in the state of Florida was Weston down in South Florida, not very far from where I grew up. And when I was growing up there, it was a mud hole. And now it's a great community. But it's not really, to me, a city, but it is. And it's just, it's a lot smaller in Port Orange. But yeah, maintaining a great police force is obviously giving them the tools they need to remain competitive for salaries. And more importantly, having all the tools that their culture will keep people there. And that's important to me.
So I know how hard you work because I know you personally. I know how much, you're committed to your political life and your service and everything else you do. And you get all this time, you make this time to coach young boys.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I had a son, and he was competitive, and he loved to play baseball. I coached his baseball. Then he got into flag football, and I coached his flag football. And then he got into basketball. I coached his basketball just because I love it. I just love to do it. But more importantly, it was, you have to be involved, because not every father or not every parent can actually have the time to coach. I was very fortunate that I owned my own business and I had the flexibility to coach. I did that because the rec leagues need volunteers, and I wanted to be that volunteer. And it just so happened I had a son who loved to play. Well, my son started surfing, and that took me away from the ball fields because I grew up surfing, and started valet parking because I liked to surf, and it led to a career. But when he started surfing, that took me away from coaching and getting him to the beach. But that young man becomes a man, and he gets the keys to the vehicle, and then I'm left behind because he can drive himself. I fell back into coaching. They need coaches. I love to coach. I love to build teams, and I love to teach kids how to build each other up and work together. And I call it, coaching is challenging our ability, character, and heart. And that all that has to work together as a team. And so that's why I do it. I love it. I've been successful, and I plan on doing it for my whole life if I can. And hopefully I'll have some grandchildren and I can coach them. But I don't have a child in these sports, and I love coaching them. And we win, and when we lose, it's okay.
So when you were coaching all of you, so when your son was doing one game and you coached that, and then another, was he always like getting in the team, or did he have to earn his place?
Oh, I had to earn his place, and he wouldn't want it any other way. I love doing that, and I love challenging people who said, "Oh, it's the coach's son." Like, yeah, well, he's on the pine. He's riding the bench right now. So, no, you have to be fair. You have to earn your position. In rec league, everyone gets to play, and that's really important. Travel ball, it's a little different story. It's they're paying to play, and the best kids are going to play. It's a little different.
So building teams in Little League and football and, community building, are you going to bring any of that into your political life? How do you?
Yeah. So coaching, creating opportunities, advancing community harmony. That's what it stands for me, and being a business owner and supporting businesses through the Chamber of Commerce, which I've done since 2002. I've had a great opportunity with our local chamber. I've gone through their leadership classes. I've led the chamber as their chairman of the board in 2019. And the whole idea of being in a chamber and sitting on the board is develop people that are coming along, that are new in the business, new in the community, and teach them how to get involved. And networking is very important to business, and then learning how to lead and volunteering your time so you can step aside and let those people advance. And that's really why I want to work with the city council. Is we're a team doing what's best for the whole city, not just a few, but the whole city. and debating how we feel, and listening to the citizens and figuring out, okay, what's going to be best for everybody. And that's what a team does. And we have, we're like the citizens are the owner, we're the GM, and we hire a city manager to go ahead and execute our plans. So it's really similar to a team.
So a couple of questions about you personally. Let's get to know who you are. Biggest influence on your life?
So my mom and dad, they're my best friends, and I talk to them almost every day. They still live in the same house I grew up in. They did great in their careers. My dad was a business owner. He owned a gas station. He was a mechanic, and then he shifted into working for people and doing his role. My mom, she started at the bottom of a law firm and worked there for 39 years in one of the top law firms in the country. And they just, their work ethic and their empathy for people, they're my idols. They're who I want to make happy. And to this day. So, then I had my first real opportunity as a kid right out of high school. I worked for a tire company in Coconut Creek, Florida, and Cypress Creek, Florida, the Fort Lauderdale area. I worked for a tire company in the Fort Lauderdale. Getting all messed up here. I worked for a tire company in the Fort Lauderdale area, and I delivered tires. And then I learned how the business operated. And that was my first real job out of high school and my first couple years of college. And the opportunities he gave me to meet different people and the responsibilities he gave me of delivering a product was real important. And then when I got in the valet parking business, I worked for a gentleman for almost 12 years, and he was a real, he taught me a lot about empathy for people and service. We were the first person they would see coming to a hotel and the last person they would see coming to a hotel. And on any given Sunday, there could be 30 of my employees working there, all trying to accomplish the same thing. And that's make sure that experience for the guest was good. So that boss, that gentleman that owned that company, Bill Bodenhammer, was an integral part of my life as well.
What do you do in your spare time?
I like to fish with my wife in our boat in the river. Yeah, when I can get my boat into the river, because Dunlawton on a Saturday morning in the summer is very crowded. Yeah. So we gotta improve that whole process of access to the river, So we love to fish. We love to go out in our boat. We love to we serve at our church, and I've been a member of Thrive Church for almost 10 years now, and we love to greet people there, and we love what they do for the community, and that's it. Spending time with my family, and I like to golf and the chamber. My second family is the Chamber of Commerce, and we've been involved with them and helping businesses thrive in our area is, to me, very important.
What's your handicap?
Well, it's ugly. It's high.
Okay.
I don't care. I have fun.
You've been watching me play.
You know what? It's I don't really pay much attention to it. I go out there, I have a good time, and if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. I don't worry about my score. I mean, obviously, you get better every day. That's I coach, so I coach myself too. Like, how can you get better? So
your faith's important to you.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So, you go through life and it throws you a bunch of different curveballs and things that you can't even control. And you got to understand that there's a reason for it all. And, through the last, I would say 30 years, I've been faced with different challenges, raising a daughter, being remarried. And when I got remarried after my first marriage failed, I married a woman who had had a relationship with Christ. And I always did. I went to a Christian school growing up, and I always felt better when I had a good when I had a good relationship with Christ. I always felt good, whether if I was not feeling good physically or mentally. If I focused on He's got a plan for me and have love for everyone else, it just worked out better. So when I met my wife Lindy, she got me closer to God, and we raised the family understanding that what I get out of my faith and what I get out of the guidance of the Bible is how I treat people. And it's clear in it that if you treat people the way you want to be treated, and maybe that's not the exact words, but do unto others that you want them to do unto you, the golden rule, but have love for people. And I think that's the most important thing that Jesus taught, was to have love for people. And I believe in that. And I have a better life because of it.
I find that moving away from a religious life is part of being young, and then people seem to gravitate back as they get older. Has that been your experience?
Exactly. I love the way you put that, because I call it a breakthrough back to Christ. And when you're going through tough times in life, and you might not be living the life you want to be living, and you have this breakthrough. We see it in people who are just broken, and they feel like they just pull that brokenness away from them, and they realize it's going to be okay. Or I had it, when I first came back to Christ, I did it on my own. I got invited to a church. I went to that church, and the pastor was selling a house, and I sold it to a friend of mine, and I lived in that house because I was going through a divorce. And he says, come on down to my church. And that breakthrough, the music starts playing, and you really start realizing how important your life is to people. And at that time, going through a divorce, I had a 1-year-old daughter, and I was a broken man. And it was tough. And I called it that breakthrough back to Christ. And then a few years later, I met my wife, Lindy, and I had that breakthrough again. And I want people to feel that if they're broken, and you have faith, there's hope out there. And you got to seek it, though. And that's what we've done. And
so what is the future of, there's a lot of change going on in the world, and there's a lot of change going on in America, and we have these global conversations, and everything happens locally. And what is the future of Port Orange? What is the future of America? What does your future look like? What is your feeling about it?
Sure. Well, the world's always been changing. We just have a technology now that just makes it a little more magnified. There's always been challenges in this world. We've been through 2 world wars. We've had regional wars. There's always going to be something going on to challenge humanity in the way we treat one another. There's nothing that's ever going to change that. We have to strive to be better, and you can do that starting on a local level. And that's where it starts. It starts in families. It starts in fixing broken families or helping a broken family. I've done that in my life. I mentor a 12-year-old through a program called No Longer Fatherless. And these are families that don't have father figures. These are young men who don't have father figures in their life. And we see the need for that guidance. And I volunteer my time for a 12-year-old. And I'm hoping that I can help him get through these teenage years and strive to be better and break that chain of not having a father. Be a father to somebody. And we're going to have changes, but I believe that you can make change on a local level. For the world, you have to be involved. You just can't be what's called a seat in a chair. You have to get out there and get involved. It's not for everybody, but if you want change, you got to be a part of it.
Are you excited about the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I meet young people coming out of high school all the time. One of the things that we do over at our Rotary Club, I've been a member of the Rotary Club Port Orange, South Daytona for the past almost 20 years, is we have a scholar athlete program. And we interview kids that are athletic and they're serving our community and they're doing good in school, and we reward them for that. And I have a gentleman that works with Aero Clinical Trials right now who I gave a scholarship to. And now this kid went and graduated high school, then went on, got a college degree, and he brought his talent back to Volusia County, and he worked for the company I work for. So I have great hope for our country. We have great people that are going to lead us in the future.
Super. So tell us what you're running for and when that date is.
Sure. So I'm running for seat 3, Port Orange Council. So it's the Port Orange City Council, seat 3. It's a citywide vote. So anyone in the city can vote, but you have to live in the district that you're running for. So this year, 2024, our representative, he terms out. So it's a great opportunity now to serve. We talked about that earlier. What made you decide? I decided a long time ago I wanted to serve, but the timing for me is right. I have adult children. I'm ready. And so it's for seat 3, Port Orange City Council.
And the date?
August 20th. It's primary day. So we need everyone to get out and vote. It's not the big election day, but it's an important day because primaries are very important. And if there's only 2 contestants, it'll run on that primary day.
So this is always a tough question to ask a politician. Why should people vote for you?
Well, I've been trusted to serve for a long time, coaching, mentoring, leading the Chamber of Commerce, owning a business, volunteering my time for Miracle League of Volusia, where we built a handicap baseball field for kids with disabilities. And people have trusted me to help our community grow through real estate sales. I've led the Daytona Beach Area Association of Realtors. I was their president in 2005. I served as a district vice president for the state of Florida's Florida Realtors for 2006. I've been serving my adult life. And now that I have grown children, the timing is right. And the mayor of Port Orange asked me a long time ago, and I was involved in economic development back in 2002. He looked over at me and another gentleman that was sitting next to me at this round table discussion, and he goes, "What are you doing here?" And we kind of looked at each other like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Don't you have a small family at home?" And we both looked at each other and, "Yeah." He goes, "Go home and raise your family. There'll be plenty of time for this. My children are grown, and it's time for me to give back to my community on a level that I feel like we can bring great things to Port Orange and continue to improve our community. And I'm asking for your vote for that because I've been trusted to serve."
Well, 2024 is going to be a big year for everyone. Shawn, thank you for coming in. It's been really fascinating getting to know you.
Thanks for having me.